This is The Long Road to Publishing, the podcast where we hear from authors who have traveled a long and bumpy road to publishing their books. Whether you're just starting out on your own writing and publishing journey, or if you're all too aware of the many possible detours along the way, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eva Langston, author, writing instructor, and creator of Eva's newsletter for writers on Substack. Thank you so much for coming along on the ride. Wendy Tokunaga was such a pleasure to talk to. Plus, she gets a special award for always sharing on social media about the long road to publishing. Look, I'm not going to promise to interview everyone who shares my posts, but I do notice, and for a long time, I've thought, oh my gosh, I have to interview Wendy because she is such a big fan of the podcast. And also, she has a fascinating publishing story. She has weathered bad book sales and agent breakups. She's published with the Big Five, St. Martin's Griffin, and she's tried her hand at self-publishing. And in this episode, she makes a strong case for why most writers should try for the traditional book deal. She was the oldest person in her MFA program. She believes you're never too old to start writing or publishing. And her latest novel, Brenda Barker's Next Chapter, features a 64-year-old aspiring author as its protagonist. I'm sure I don't need to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, but I'm doing it anyway. And now on with the episode, which I'm calling Writing and Publishing Later in Life. Wendy Tokunaga is a novelist, editor, writing instructor, and acclaimed cat servant based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She is the author of the novels Midori by Moonlight and Love in Translation, among others. Her new novel, Brenda Barker's Next Chapter, is published by Blyden Square Books. She holds an MFA from the University of San Francisco and teaches for Stanford's Novel Writing Certificate Program. When not writing, editing, teaching, or discovering the best new restaurant, she sings jazz and bossa nova standards with her keyboardist husband. So welcome to The Long Road to Publishing.
Oh, thank you, Eva. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, and I am also a cat servant as well. My cats are, you can't see them in the background, but they're right over there, just probably waiting for their next meal. So, okay, your book, Brenda Barker's Next Chapter, literally just came out a few days ago. So, first, I just want to ask, how are you feeling right now?
Oh, I'm excited. It's a little overwhelming. It's nice to be out with a traditionally published book again because it's been
Yeah.
a while for me. So,
Yes. Okay. Well, we're definitely going to have to hear the whole saga, but do you want to give us the elevator pitch?
Brenda Barker's next chapter is about Brenda Barker, and she's a 64-year-old widow from North Carolina who miraculously gets into a high-stakes writers conference and a prestigious writers conference in the California wine country. She's always dreamed of being a published novelist, and this is now her chance. And the book is also a satire on writers' conferences, on publishing, on literary agents, on pompous authors, aspiring writers. It addresses a lot of the issues that come up on your podcast. So I think that
So basically, anyone listening to this podcast will probably want to read
I
your
hope
book.
they would appreciate it. But
Yeah.
also the book, food and wine also play a big role in it.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, all right. You've convinced me because I love reading books that are set in the writing world or the publishing world. And actually, it's really funny because I went to a writers conference in September, and then there's so much, I don't want to say drama, but like I don't know. I was like, I want to write a book set at a writers conference, but I'll have to read yours and make sure that I don't do
There
it
can
like
be a
you.
lot of drama. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
sometimes there can be a lot of drama or a lot of like feelings, I guess. Okay, so here you are now, but let's kind of go back in time and lead back up to this moment. You know, I know a lot of writers say, "Oh, I always wanted to be a writer," but when do you feel like you really got serious about I'm going to write books and get them published?
First I want to say that I'm not one of those people who wanted to be a writer from the beginning. What I wanted to be was a rock star. And
Ah,
I was really into music. That was my creative outlet. I did songwriting, I played bass guitar, I sang lead vocals in my little bands. and I entered a songwriting contest that was sponsored by a Japanese record company, and I won a prize, and I got to go perform my song in Japan.
Oh my gosh, how cool.
And that led me to kind of singing early kind of J-pop music and Japanese blues music. And I was in some contests and on some TV shows. And so that was my creative outlet then. But when I was in my late 30s, I got a job as a tech writer in Silicon Valley. And of course, at this company, there were a lot of people who were like frustrated fiction writers. And
Mm,
because they wanted to have a job where they could write, even though tech writing is very different from fiction writing. And so what they did was at lunchtime, they had these little exchanges of their stories and a workshopping kind of thing. And I really got intrigued by that. And I thought, well, I think I'd like to write some stories because I was immersed at that time in Japanese culture, Japan. I was married to a Japanese man who was born in Japan, and I thought I think I want to express myself, writing stories about that. So what I did was I went to my local community college and I already had a BA in psychology, so I was just going kind of as adult ed at night. And there was a short story class. So by when I finished this course of, 3 semesters, I had 9 stories. And so I started to send those out to small journals. They were mostly about Japan and Japanese culture. And these journals, dealt with that subject matter. And I got a few published. And I also had done well in the class and I got a lot of encouragement. So I felt like I could write and I had a talent. But then I eventually wanted to move on and write a novel. Oh, wow. How hard could that be? And then
famous last words.
it turned out to be extremely hard. It's a
Yep.
totally different beast, but I took a stab at it. I started taking some classes and workshops, and I ended up writing this novel. And I thought, oh, I think, it's ready and everything. And I started querying agents for it. I really didn't know what I was doing. And this is like, I don't know, when was this, in the late 90s or whatever. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm querying and I get a little excitement, like I'd send the first pages and then they say, "Oh, send the whole thing." And then it was like, "No, thank you." It was
Mm-hmm.
like, so nothing happened. And then I heard about this woman writer who had this is the early days of self-publishing. And so she had self-published one of her novels, and then she got discovered and got a traditional book deal. So I said, "Oh, that's what I have to do. Okay, I'm going to do that." So I self-published this book, and the book didn't go anywhere, of course. But then I entered it in this contest sponsored by Writer's Digest called the Best Self-Published Book Awards.
Which I think they still have.
I think this was the second year maybe that they'd had
Oh,
it.
wow.
This is
Yeah.
the early days of the self-publishing kind of, wasn't a frenzy yet, but it was, So I entered that contest and I won in the mainstream fiction division. I didn't win the whole grand prize, but I won in mainstream fiction. They gave me some nice feedback. And then I naively thought, well, now all the agents are going to want this book. So I queried again. And, of course, nobody wanted it. First of all, I didn't even think, well, even the case now, they don't sometimes want a self-published book because it's already been out there, unless it's sold a gazillion copies.
Right.
But the main thing was that that book had a lot of problems. Was not, I didn't really know what I was doing.
Because this was the first novel you'd ever
Yeah,
written.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was just, because usually what happened with me is I would get a lot of compliments on my writing, even from teachers and such, but nobody was like really reading the whole thing and analyzing it and say, well, here's all the weak parts. This is not working. And of course, I know all this stuff now. And I'm a developmental editor, I help people with this. But at the time, so I gave up on that book and I started writing more books. I tried to improve my craft. I tried to learn as much as possible. This was in the early 2000s. I went to writers' conferences. I went to a juried writer conference and got in, so I always had this encouragement. And I would query agents and I kept writing and I just could not get an agent. I also connected with some people at the time, there was really no social media. So I connected with fellow writers on these email lists. And we had little communities. And I connected with these romance writers. And I wasn't writing romance really. I wasn't really interested in writing it. But what I really liked about these people was that they knew all about the ins and outs of getting an agent, the
Mm.
publishing industry. They would say things like, oh, so and so got the call. And that meant, oh, the call from the agent to offer representation, and you weren't, an unpublished author, you were pre-pubbed, so
Oh, right.
kind
Yeah.
of very optimistic look at it,
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from these authors, and some of them were just getting agents, and some of them were getting published, gave me encouragement, but I still was lagging far behind. I still couldn't get a agent for any of these manuscripts I was writing.
At this point, how many manuscripts would you say? Can you remember how many you had
Yes,
written?
I had written five,
Okay.
and so this was at this point. I was in my early 50s. I said, well, okay, I want to get something out of all this work I've done and all these
Yeah,
men.
because at this point, you've done all these years of workshops and conferences and all. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
That's right. I did. And I just kept plugging away. I'm not quite sure how I did it, but I did. I was just motivated. And I got enough encouragement, but I never got the brass ring.
Right.
I decided to apply to MFA school. So I applied to, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was in my early 50s. I'm not going to apply to programs across the country and I wasn't interested in low residency programs, which are the kind where you visit, for like two
Right.
weeks.
That's actually what I did. I
Oh,
did
you
the
did a
low
low res?
residency. Yeah. Well, I think because I was so naive at the time, I didn't realize that you could actually like get some sort of like teaching stipend or something where you could,
Oh,
and so I thought, oh, well, the only way that I can afford an MFA is if I work, I kept my day job and then you took online classes and then you would go, I think it was for
right.
like 5 weeks in the summer
Mhm.
and do your residency just for the
And it
5 weeks in the
wouldn't
summer.
it wouldn't disrupt your life as much. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I
Yeah.
wasn't, yeah, I wasn't really into that. I wasn't thinking in terms of teaching stipends or anything like that. I applied at several of the local schools and I got into the one that I really liked the most. I went to their orientation, everything. That was at University of San Francisco. And they did have, I think they still do, they have at the time had a program that was at night. So it
Hmm.
was geared more toward working people. Luckily, I didn't have to work while I was going, and it's a very rigorous program. I think it would have been very challenging to work full time and go, but it was set up that way. So it was at night. And I was about the oldest person in the program, even though it was geared toward maybe older people, there was still a lot of younger people in it. And I was older than some of the teachers, not
Oh.
but anyway, I didn't care. But naively, I thought that most of the students had been like me, like querying agents, writing manuscripts, going to conferences. And it turned out, no, a lot of them were just saying, I want to write now. So they were new at it. But
Yeah.
I go around saying, oh, yeah, I got another rejection from an agent. And then they'd look at me like I had two heads. So I was in, I think, the sixth week of my semester and I got an offer from an agent.
And you got the call.
I got the call. Yes, exactly. I got the call. And then it was like less than a month or a month later, she got me a book deal. So here I am in my first semester, official semester of my MFA, and I have a book deal and an agent. And it caused quite a brouhaha. And the teachers and the director asked me, "Oh, are you going to quit?" And I'm going, "What? I wouldn't want to quit." I was enjoying it so much, taking the time to, learn my craft and study craft and analyze literature. I said, "No way."
Wow, I'm sure there was probably a little bit of jealousy with some of the other students though, I would imagine.
I think there was, but most people were very supportive. I think too, people, it's very subjective, It's like, well, what's so special about her writing, kind of
Mm.
thing. But I didn't really let that bother me. I mean, most people were very happy for me. So with this agent, she got me a book deal with St. Martin's Griffin. And this was a book that I'd written called Midori by Moonlight. This was the one that she sold. And she said, "Well, you have a choice." She goes, "You can either just take this book deal for this one book, and if it does well, you can maybe negotiate for a second book deal and you get a bigger advance. Or she said, you can just take a two-book deal now." So I
Mm.
decided to take the two-book deal.
Well, after all those years querying with all those projects, you're probably like, yeah, let's just take the two. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I
well,
know.
that has how I was. Maybe some people wouldn't have. I don't know.
Yeah, I know that's something that's still, even though I know this happened a while ago, that's still like a choice that people are also often having to figure out. Like, do I take the two book deal and it's guaranteed,
Right.
or do I wait and see how this first book does and then I can maybe get a better deal on the second one? So the first book was Midori by Moonlight, and you took the two book deal. And what genre of book was this?
Well, that's a good question because this was at the time, and this book, both books came out in trade paperback. I did not have the experience of a hardcover. At the time, I would say this. If you love chick lit, these books are chick lit. If you hate chick lit, these books are not chick lit. They were books about women,
Hmm.
Is it women's fiction? Is it mainstream fiction? I don't like all that, but you have had to use it. But Midori by Moonlight it was a book about a Japanese woman who came to the US, and then the follow-up book, Love in Translation, was about an American woman who went to Japan, So these are
Okay.
still books about Japan and were based on some of my people I knew and experiences and stuff. So yeah, it was a very exciting time getting that first book published. I got some nice reviews. The publisher did set me up in the Bay Area with various displays. I walked into a few bookstores and there was my book. It was very exciting. My first big launch thing was at the big Borders bookstore in Union Square in San Francisco, and it does not exist anymore.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
that's all. It was a different world back then. But I didn't get this big national attention or anything. But I was happy with whatever I got because this is my kind of dream come true. It's really what I wanted to do. And then, so that book came out in 2007, Midori by Moonlight. And then the next book came out in late 2009, Love in Translation.
Can I
And
ask, was Love and Translation one of the other manuscripts you'd been working on, or did you write something new?
no, I wrote
Okay.
that when I was under a contract.
Did you work on Love and Translation like in your MFA workshops?
I think I was working on two. I would submit some of this one I was working on, if I remember correctly, and then another one
Oh,
that
wow.
never
Okay.
has
So
saw
you're
the light.
doing a lot of writing in this time.
Well, I was passionate about these two different projects, and I knew that the one I was working on, the MFA, that they wouldn't want at St.
Mm,
Martin's.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, so yeah, so then you felt like you had a pretty good, even though it didn't come out in hardback, it still felt,
It was
good to see
published.
it was published, it was in the bookstores. Yeah.
And then the other thing was, I just want to say, I did finish my MFA. I graduated in 2008, and that allowed me to teach, and I became an instructor for the Stanford's Novel Writing Certificate program. I also developed in my MFA school this talent, I don't know where it came from, for really giving good feedback. I had a knack for kind of seeing where the strong parts and weak parts of a story. I can't say that I can do it for myself all the time, but
Right.
for other people, Yeah. So I became a developmental editor. And then I did a lot of talks at writers' clubs, and I became involved with the San Francisco Writers Conference and things like that. So I felt like I was living this literary life, which I still
Yeah.
live.
Yeah. Tell me about this novel certificate program.
It's kind of modeled after a MFA. It's not an
Okay.
MFA, obviously. It doesn't cost as much as an MFA, but it's a 2-year program that's pretty rigorous where you learn the nuts and bolts about writing novels, and there's workshops, but it's all online. Um,
Okay.
and so people from all over the world can take it.
Okay. Yeah, see, it's very interesting to hear about this because I feel like, and maybe I think things are different now. I actually graduated with my MFA in 2009. So we were doing our MFAs around the same time. But I went to get my MFA thinking, okay, this is going to teach me how to write a novel because I had tried to write a novel, or I had written a novel and I knew it was bad, but I couldn't figure out how to make it better. And so I just thought, oh, I'll get my MFA. But as you probably know, the MFA doesn't always teach you how to write a novel. Oftentimes, at least in my experience, it's more like the line level, the crafting of, the sentences. And we did a lot of short stories. We were kind of discouraged from workshopping a novel. And so it's interesting to hear like there's these alternative programs where like, you know,
Now there are,
now
yeah.
there are where I don't need the MFA. I don't want to teach or.
Yeah, there are quite a few of these from what I know, and some of them are very geared toward getting published, which is again another thing that MFAs are famous for not stressing that. I think
Not preparing you for.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think some things have maybe changed. And also in my MFA program, we did have the choice of either doing short fiction or long fiction, and then people also could do creative nonfiction. I mean, again, it's still very hard to get published. It's still hard to, hone your craft and everything, but I think there are so many more opportunities now. Now.
Right. Yeah, and I think more kind of just information for better or worse, more information of how to write and how to get published and
All these YouTube videos, and there's a lot of misinformation, but there's a lot of good information too. You know,
right. Okay, so yeah, so you kind of got deep into this literary life and you're working as a developmental editor.
and okay, then I'll tell you what happened next.
Yeah, so what happened next? You know how this podcast goes.
Yeah,
Tell me what happened
right.
next.
So, dun, 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 dun. All right, okay. Basically, those two books with St. Martin's Griffin did not sell very well.
Mm,
And that's just a fact of life. And my agent, ended up dropping me. And it
uh,
was really devastating. And I was again kind of naive about the whole process. I understand it now, but it didn't feel very good. So I think she felt sorry for me. So I had written this other novel afterward called His Wife and Daughters, which had nothing to do with Japan or anything. It was kind of a political novel, but about children and wives of politicians who have scandals and stuff, and the fallout that affects them. So anyway, my agent who dropped me, I think she was mentoring this woman who was wanted to be an agent. So she put me in touch with her. So I
mm.
signed with her, and she tried to sell this book. I don't know. It just she said, "Oh, I don't want to tell you anything of what I'm doing. I don't want to tell you about rejections I might be getting." And I didn't know, I didn't have that experience with the other agent because she got me that deal. And so basically she said, "Oh, well, we got kind of close with one publisher, but it fell through, so nothing happened with that book, and then we parted ways."
Wow. Okay, I want to go back. All right, because now we've gone through two agents so far. I want to go back to this first agent
Yeah.
when she kind of broke up with you. Did she come out and say like, "Oh, the sales weren't very good," or did she have some sort of like veiled language for it of like why she was passing you off to this mentee of
It was
hers?
just very murky.
Yeah.
I was just felt, I don't know, I just felt so bad about it. I wasn't the type of person to go, "Well, what's going on here?" I
Right.
was just like, yeah, it's been a long time, and I'm very grateful to her
Yeah. Yeah.
because she started the ball rolling, and I don't want to say negative things, but this is what happened. And I think it's
Yeah.
a common story. And agents, they're not here to be, they're not charity workers or something.
I mean, agents do make money off of their authors. And so if your book's not making very much money, but now I think there are more opportunities for agents to have like side hustles. You think about like Manuscript Academy, there's agents that like do consultations and they teach classes. And then
Yeah,
there's, the Shit No One Tells You About Writing podcast is two
yeah,
agents.
but yeah, you're right.
So I do
Yeah.
think, I think things have changed in like that. I'm sure this still happens, but that like maybe if agents have other ways of making money, then like they'll weather some bad sales with their clients. I don't know.
I can only speak just from, observation, but I do think that a lot of people have left the agency world because there is no money in it for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's some agents who are very editorial, who maybe could teach some very practical classes or something. But the ones who are just the sales people, and I'm not denigrating them or anything,
Right, right. Yeah.
that's what they do. I don't know how they parlay that into I mean maybe they teach people how to write query letters. I don't know enough about.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Well, my first agent, he signed me having only read the first 50 pages of my novel,
Wow.
and which is in hindsight like should have been red flags, but I was so excited at the time. And then he read the rest of the novel and he was like, there's something wrong with it. I don't know what it is. And then he actually hired a developmental editor. I didn't have to pay for it, and I don't know, I think this was like maybe someone he was connected with or something, but he got a developmental editor to look at my book because I think he was just a very like sales oriented agent. He wasn't an editorial agent. And so then we got the feedback back from her, and I did a revision. And then he was like, okay, seems great to me. But now I'm like, I don't know if I should trust that because,
That's a very interesting story and I
yeah,
had
and I didn't know that agents did that, that they would like take your book and have another person give you editorial feedback before you even try to sell it. But I guess there's all kinds of things that happen in the publishing world.
yes,
So,
all different kinds of agents too. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so then you had the second agent. She didn't really tell you much about what was happening with submission, and then was just like, we got close, didn't sell, and then you guys parted ways. Oh boy.
I just didn't want to continue. And I think I had written another novel, but I don't know. It just didn't work out. And then I had this really long kind of, dry period as far as publishing. So what I did was I self-published some of these novels.
Okay.
And I know you have people on your podcast with different experiences, and I'll just give my opinion right now. For me, I'm not famous, I don't have a huge platform. Self-publishing fiction just doesn't seem practical to me for a lot of people. Now,
Yeah.
if you're well known, if you have readers already, it can work for you. If you have a backlist that you get back, I mean, okay, but just self-publishing. And I have this with my students and with my clients. They'll say, oh, maybe I'll just self-publish. I say, no, try for the traditional, at least try, get
Yeah.
it good
Yeah.
enough, try to get an agent, because I just don't think it works for most people. And if, obviously if you just want the book out there, but most people don't just want the book out there. You just can't compete with all these books out there. How do you get
So
attention?
many books out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you bring that up because I do try to show all different types of publishing stories. But I think you're right that, like, Karen Gillespie, she already had a huge following and she had books. She got her backlist back and she was self-publishing books that had previously been traditionally published. So that she even
And that
explains
can be very
the
lucrative.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Amazon reviews carried over. And then you've got somebody like Rebecca Thorne, who was extremely strategic about using TikTok. It just that she happened to get lucky and get on TikTok at the right time to build a huge following there. So it's like, unless you are both very lucky and have like a kind of a built-in audience, your book
Yes.
is just going to go out into the
It'll be
void, I
floating
think.
out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's just my opinion. So I did I self-published a few novels. I self-published a collection of short stories. But then I just said, I'm not going to self-publish anymore. I'm just, and who knows why I even did it, but I did it. It was kind of a thing to do, I guess.
Yeah. I'm sure sometimes you feel like I have this manuscript I've worked so hard on. It seems a shame to just have it sit here. I don't know. I feel
Yeah,
that way sometimes about some of my old
well,
manuscripts.
I know. And
So,
maybe it's
yeah.
okay. It depends what you expect. But for
Hmm.
me personally, I don't like all that legwork that goes into self-publishing. I want someone else to do it for me. I don't want to buy the ISBN and I don't want to, figure out the cover. I can't do covers. I'm not, artistic that way.
Yeah.
Finding the right people. I just so
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
rather have somebody else do it. So yeah, so what I did, so again, I leading my literary life and everything, and I'm happy about it. But on the side, I'm still writing, and I wrote some manuscripts, and I would send to agents. And again, it was kind of a repeat thing. I just didn't get anywhere. Then I decided I want to write a book about this writing life,
Yeah.
this whole world that I'm in. That's usually what I write about is stuff that I'm interested in. It's just what's going on with me. So I started writing this book that became Brenda Barker's next chapter. It started out, much different. It had three characters' points of view, and it was heavily the satire. I was trying to imitate. I was hoping I could imitate, the Christopher Guest movies,
Oh, yeah.
because I was trying to do that.
Oh,
Um,
I love using that as like it's Christopher Guest in a novel form. I like that
Yeah, well,
idea.
I attempted that, but I don't know, it didn't quite work for me at least. And I was querying to agents this book in many early forms, and then I'd revise it. I worked with an editor. So then by the time I decided to make it first person voice, I mean, these characters that I created are still in the story, but
Hmm.
it's Brenda Barker is mainly her story, and it developed and went a little different direction. So I then did query agents with this Brenda Barker, this latest revision and stuff. And I did get some interest, but people said that they wanted more about Brenda and maybe her romantic life and less about the writing and the publishing.
Mm,
And I understood that because maybe not everyone wants to read that, but that's what I wanted to write about. And so, nothing worked out. So what happened was I don't know why, but I never, in my whole time with this writing thing, I never considered submitting to small presses. I think one reason was, and I don't know if this was true or not, back in the day, a lot of those presses were very literary. I can't describe how I write. It's not strictly genre. It's not literary. It's somewhere in between. I try to be
hmm.
entertaining, but I also want to give a message. Anyway, I thought, well, why don't I try that? And now I think there are quite a variety of small presses that publish all different kinds of books. So I gave up on agents for this book and I decided to query some small presses. I did some research and I queried a few and I got a response from this Blyden Square Books. I think I sent the first 50 pages. I think that's what they wanted. And they wrote and they said, "Oh, this is interesting. Can you send me the full manuscript and we'll get back to you in a few months." So I sent it, and then I think they got in touch with me like in a couple weeks because they
Oh,
read it
wow.
and they said they really liked it. It was so nice. We love this book.
Yeah.
Publish it. Like, ah,
Yeah. To hear that after all this time is like, ah,
I'm not paying for anything. They do everything, it's like what a concept. I mean, now we have these hybrid publishers, we have the self-publishing, and everyone can choose what they want. But I just always encourage my students, my clients, or whatever, go try and go for the traditional publishing. That's kind of the way it's supposed to be. They want to publish your book. They're not going to make you pay this or that. So
right. They believe in it.
yeah,
And
they believe in
yeah.
it, they like it, they have something invested in it. That's
Hmm.
just what I like. So Yeah, so it was very exciting, and the book is out now.
Yeah. So, well, tell me a little bit about your experience with them, and your experience with the book launch. Because, yeah, like I said, I think it just came out like 2 or 3 days ago, right?
Yeah, well, officially, yeah. And then
Yeah.
this other thing that was new for me is this pre-order thing.
Mm.
When
Hmm.
I was being published, there was no such thing as pre-order. And then another thing, yeah. So working with this publisher is, like I said, they've done everything. They even are making an audiobook. I never had an audiobook for any of my books, and I don't think it was very common at that time.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a famous author, and maybe it was nonfiction or something like that, got an audiobook. I don't know. But now audiobooks are obviously, very popular.
Huge. Yeah.
And so this has been so exciting because they arranged the auditions of these narrators, and I got to list them. I didn't have to do all this legwork and figure it out. They said, "Oh, here's, 15 auditions of these people all reading from the same part." And it was so exciting. And I consider myself a good reader, and I could have done it myself, but I thought most authors don't do that, no matter how well they read. So anyway, I did find someone who's really terrific, and they're working on it now, and I don't know when it'll be out.
Oh, how cool. So did you get kind of the final say of who they chose, or?
Yes, because yeah, I did. And she's great, and I love, and I've heard, bits of it so far, but it's still in progress. So that was
Oh,
very
okay.
exciting to me, and to hear, I just haven't had that experience before of having something I've written, someone else acting it out.
Yeah, then you get to hear how they're interpreting it. My mom is a playwright, and
Oh, wow.
I mean, she does mostly community theater stuff, but she has published a couple of plays. But I always think that must be such an interesting experience when something you've written, then you like see people
Yes.
acting it out and directing and making choices with. So cool. I'm glad you're having a good experience with this. That sounds, yeah, really nice. So another question I have. So you said that Brenda, the character Brenda, is in her 60s. Is that right?
64. This takes place 10 years ago, approximately. So she's 64 then, yeah.
Okay, because I just read something recently, and I can't remember if I met you through Substack or not, so I don't know if you're on Substack. But I read something recently about how so many readers are women in their 50s, 60s, and yet so many of the protagonists in a lot of traditionally published novels are still younger. Someone was telling me that the average age of a female protagonist is 27. Don't quote me on that, but
Mm.
that like there's a desire for older protagonists that the traditional publishers are maybe not always meeting. And I saw something, I'll have to link to it in the show notes, and once I find it, there was like this article, and it was dividing books into like maiden, mother, and crone. The different like young women, like middle-aged age women, and then
Uh,
older women, and say it said something like the maidens are sucking all the air out of traditional traditional publishing or something like that.
oh, I
But
haven't
I
heard that.
but I just wonder if maybe, because you had an older protagonist, you
Yeah.
weren't getting interest from the traditional publishers, but then the smaller indie press liked it, and hopefully you'll find a lot of readers.
It's possible. It's possible. I don't know. There's a lot of ageism that way. Although I do like to say that I don't believe there's like ageism as far as getting published if you write a good story. I think they'll
Hmm.
publish anybody. There's sometimes I have my students say, "Oh, aren't I too old to get published?" I say, "No, if you write a good story, they'll take it,
Yeah,
you know." But on the other hand, yeah, I think an older protagonist but the thing is, at least in my book, yes, it's an older protagonist. It's a first person voice, but I mean, it does deal with ageism, this book too. And she does meet these younger, aspiring writers. Most of the people at her writers conference she goes to are all young. So there's
yeah,
characters who are young, and they might butt heads a little bit, but then they end up with these wonderful friendships. So
yeah.
I kind of like it to bridge that gap that it doesn't really matter how old you are. If you're all wanting to publish your novel, it doesn't matter really.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to read it. It sounds so good.
Okay.
And it reminds me a little bit of my low residency MFA because it was low residency. I think I was one of the younger students, honestly. I was, in my mid 20s,
Mhm.
and I still have friends from that MFA program who were like in their 40s, 50s, 60s when they did the MFA, and you kind of realize like, oh, they have stories. Like I don't have as many stories. Like, you know,
Yes,
I they have a lot of stories, a lot of life experience to put into their novels and
I have heard that complaint from some like older writers who are going to writers conferences and going workshops and saying how yeah that the I mean and this is just a generalization but that the younger writers are just writing angst.
yeah.
Not much story, just a lot of angst.
Now, I will say though that I do think, and I'm sure this can, well, I'll just say I think sometimes the younger writers in their 20s can write really well in the YA genre because the YA genre, you kind of have to be close to that high
Yeah,
school angsty feeling.
that is a good point. Yes.
Well, okay, so what's something that has surprised you on this whole writing and publishing journey? And it can be something good or something bad or one of each.
I think what has surprised me is just how determined I was and how I never gave up. And I'm not sure why. I still think about that, you know. It's kind of, yeah, I put that in my character too, in Brenda Barker, you know, she doesn't give up even though she has a lot of obstacles and you do have to persevere. You do have to be that way, but I'm still here. I'm still persevering. You know, I've been up and down and up and down, but I just think it's like you just celebrate each milestone. You know, you just keep going and you can lead this, you know, creative life, this literary life, you know, without getting published every minute. It'd be, you know, you know this, everyone's journey is so different.
Totally.
That's why I think
Yes.
this podcast is just so valuable because you get to hear these stories and then you also, you know, you don't want to compare yourself to other writers, you know, and think, oh, well, how come she got this book deal and I didn't, or this and this and that. You just hear how there's just so many ways to achieve this and it's, you know, as you say too, it's luck and timing too, not just
Mhm.
talent.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's been, I say this all the time, but it's been really healing for me as well to just, realize like I'm not the only one struggling and having a really long, hard go of it. And it is, we just keep going. And I'm sure that you must love it or you wouldn't still
Well,
be
I'd
here.
have to.
Yeah.
Just saying to people, you better love it because it's not always a fun time, you know.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I end every episode with a tip for the road for our listeners. So will you teach how to write novels with the novel certificate program? So maybe you can give us a tip about novel writing, but it can be anything writing or publishing related.
I think I said this already. I said I would not just go ahead and self-publish novels. I would say, yeah, don't compare yourself to other writers. Don't I would say celebrate you know, you can even sell, I mean, it sounds maybe weird, but you know, if you're querying and you keep getting rejected, well, at least you're querying. You're putting yourself out there. It's very difficult, you know. So you just celebrate each milestone. And if you get an agent, that's quite an accomplishment. And then if you get the agent, you know, as a lot of people on the podcast and yourself, and you're on submission, and then that doesn't happen. And yes, that's very disappointing, but look how far you've gotten. And it's just you just keep going and it'll be the next step.
Yeah, I think that we don't, oh, well, I'll say for myself, I don't always take the time to celebrate the milestones. And I think I need to be better about that because you're right. Like, every step is so hard. Like, celebrate how far you've come. Yeah.
Well, I was just so impressed and I'll tell you, yeah, I met you. I didn't meet you through Substack. I met you through that Jane Friedman article you wrote. And I was just so impressed that you took your own personal situation. You were frustrated that you could not get that brass ring, during the submission process. And a lot of time it's just luck and timing, and it's a drag, But then you turned it around, and then you created this podcast, and that's such an accomplishment that I think you should be celebrating. I'm sure you are. I mean, and it's helping so many people. It's cathartic. It's
Yeah,
formative. It's giving voices, giving my voice, people like me, and
yeah.
I just think it's terrific.
Well, and it's given me a to read list that's about this high
Yeah, I
because
know.
everybody I talk to, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I really need to read your book or your books.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
and just community too. It's been so great
Yes,
to meet people and like really hear. I mean, I think so much of what we see, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and to see everything that came before it is just really eye-opening and hopefully encouraging to people too.
I mean, this is something I wanted to say, I guess. You know, okay, let's say you say, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. And okay, that's a laudable goal. Great. And maybe you do make that. But what if your next book isn't? Or what if your next book, they don't even want it? It doesn't even get published? Or there's a New York Best Time seller person who said, well, I only sold this many books. I mean, you can have that mindset where you're so competitive and it's never enough and you just have to keep climbing, climbing, climbing. And I don't know if that does you any good, but
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
no, I think you have to, yeah, you just have to do it for the love of the story. And of course I mean, it's so hard because like, of course you want your book out there. Of course you want people to read it.
sure,
It's
yeah.
nice to get some nice
But I think we
reviews
just
and
want
things
to
like that. But
appreciate everything. Appreciate
yeah,
everything you've accomplished is, I guess, my point is, you know, it's like, but like there's always these things where people, maybe you meet someone and say, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a writer. Oh, you write books? Yes. Oh, would I have heard of anything that you wrote? And you have to
which
say,
is such a loaded
no.
question because I feel like the average person has probably only heard of a handful of recent titles
Did
anyway.
you
So
write
it's like,
Da Vinci Code? Or
right, right.
yeah,
So
I mean, it's just so silly, but yeah, I know. So there's obviously a lot of self-doubt and such going that goes along with this career
yeah, yeah. Well,
insecurity.
all the more reason to read all the publishing satire books. So,
Thank you. Yes, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
It's just cathartic, yeah.
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that we got to hear about your journey, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Oh, thank you so much, Eva. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Long Road to Publishing. Many of the books we discuss on the podcast can be found at my bookshop shop, the link for which is in the show notes. My guests' books and many of the resources we discuss on the show can also be found in the show notes. You can find me online on Instagram, Bluesky, and Substack with the handle Eva Langston. Even better, subscribe to my free newsletter for writers at evalangston.substack.com and feel free to send me an email. The podcast address is longroad.pub@gmail.com. The Long Road to Publishing is produced and edited by me, Eva Langston, and the intro-outro music comes from the artist's sound roll on Upbeat. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and I'll be back soon with more publishing stories and more tips for the road.